Welcome back to the Trainwell podcast. This is Joey Maestis along with my co-host Darian Healy, and today's episode is about breathwork. We talked to one of our own, Miss Lili Riley. Let me tell you a little bit about her and where she comes from. She is a holistic trainer and she's a breathwork practitioner with a background in psychology. And she's been dedicated to guiding others toward true alignment of mind, body, and soul. She has a passion for helping others reconnect with their intuition through movement, through eating, through daily practices, and most importantly, mindset. She combines science and soul to empower lasting overall life transformation and getting individuals back to the most authentic selves.
Not only that, but we start off this episode with such a silly conversation, and Lili was such a good sport about just jumping in with us and having fun. We loved talking to her. Remember, if you want to try Trainwell, 14 days for free, get matched with a personal trainer, you can find the link in the show description and in the podcast description. So go ahead and check that out. And stay tuned. We're going to talk to Lili right now.
Okay, cherries and pits, Lili. Cherry is something rad that happened to you, and a pit is something that was not so rad that happened to you.
Okay, this actually just happened at the gym, and it's kind of in the same situation. I don't know if this counts, but I was actually front squatting, and I wasn't aware of what was going around me. There was like a bunch of like weights on this kind of cart, and there was a little thing sticking out. And as I was going down to front squat, it hit the thing, and someone behind me came and helped me out, and I was like, "Yo." I was like, that was super close. So it was almost a pit, but it was totally a cherry moment. Does that count? Can we count that?
Oh, wait, I don't understand. What actually happened? Your barbell hit something?
So it was like the end of the barbell. I was like going down, and there was this cart, and something was sort of sticking out, and I didn't really see that it was sticking out at that angle. It was my fault. It was totally my fault, basically is what I'm saying.
Every time someone brings up a lifting like one, I get instantly so panicky and like sweaty. Like, oh God, what are they going to say? Their pants ripped or something horribly embarrassing happened. So that wasn't like too bad.
No.
I farted at the bottom of a front squat before. And
Of course you have, Joey.
Definitely.
We've all been there.
What is it noticeable to others?
Yeah, it was like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm in a gym with like 8 squat racks lined up, and like it's like
you're in the middle.
Yeah, no, I was like on the far left, but I was next to a wall, so this smell kind of.
Oh God, there was a smell.
You probably had a bit of a ricochet moment.
Yeah, totally. Kind of lingered too, like sweaty.
You hate to start an episode with farts, maybe, but would you rather? If you were going to fart at the bottom of a squat, would you rather it be super loud, no smell, or silent but deadly?
Loud. Lili, what do you think?
I'm kind of a coward, so I would say silent but deadly maybe. If there's other people around, and then you could blame it, because if it's loud, everyone knows it's you. But also, maybe if I'm feeling more confident, I would say loud. I mean, if you're squatting a lot of weight, it's, whatever goes.
Whatever happens, happens.
Whatever happens.
For me, that's a really hard one for me, because on one hand, if it's silent, you could easily like look around like, who did that? That's weird. And like, play it off like it's not you. But just you would know it's you. And for me, like the mortification of knowing that was me and like other people possibly assuming is too much to handle, versus if it was really, really loud, but no smell at all, I almost would be like proud of myself. Like, do you see everyone? I can fart that loud and it doesn't even smell.
I hope our listeners are getting psyched about this.
I feel like this is really relatable, but you know what? Let's move on. Actually, this is a good segue, because Lili is like a holistic trainer, and like farts are part of life,
This is super in line with what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, if you can relate like how farts are healing and contribute to recovery, that'd be awesome.
I think we're gonna have to schedule another podcast for that one, guys. That one we're gonna have to go deep in on that one.
We might have to. So, okay, on that note, why don't we get going on what we're actually going to talk about today? So, we're kind of going to talk about like recovery, but I would say kind of like the woo-woo side of recovery. I think that's like what people might think of it, but it's actually like a very legitimately helpful thing to do, like breath work and make sure you're fully recovered from your training sessions, and sleep and meditation and all these things have like a really legitimate place in the bigger picture of like a training program and life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think where I feel like my expertise is definitely in more of that kind of like emotional health type of space. And, a lot of people can relate that to spiritual health. It's definitely how I align with it. And, I feel like there's a lot of biohacking out there, which I've been really trying to explore a little bit. And I wouldn't say that I'm a professional in any sense, but I think that there's absolutely a way that all of those can align in your recovery. And I think, I always say to my clients, like, recovery is where all the magic happens. That's where all of your hard work, comes to life. You can't be training hard all of the time. And honestly, there's a whole other side of this where like finding that balance when it comes to training your life, how you speak to yourself in training, how you also operate in recovery, your relationship to recovery. There's so many levels to it. And yeah, so I definitely find a lot of power in my own life within recovery in that space, because that's been a really difficult space for me to actually navigate and not feel guilty and not feel shame and not feel like I should always be doing something. So yeah, that's been a really, really big journey for me, just even entering that space.
Can you actually like walk us through your life really quick? Because you were a professional rugby player and you are like super into this more like meditative breath work, holistic training space. And like in my mind, I don't tend to think of like a rugby player, which is like a really brutal sport. And like those two things in my mind don't super go together. How did you initially get into rugby? Like take us down that path first.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started playing rugby. I'd never get the age right, but I think I was around like 17, 18 or something like that. I had played soccer my entire life, and just my older sister was playing and she always wanted to get me to play, and I wanted to go to college to play soccer because I was really competitive with that. And then just had a moment where I was like, let me just try it out. And I went to one training and I was like, that's it. This is for me. This is what I'm doing. So yeah, I ended up going to college. I got a scholarship to play rugby in college. And that's where a lot of my relationship actually to sport really changed. My relationship to my body really changed. Rugby was such an awesome avenue to also explore my relationship to my body, because, it was so much more about not what it looked like, but what I could do and how I was performing, and also changing how I was training from solely an aesthetic based place to your job is to, do the best that you can, and you can't be training to look a certain way. It's, how can you feel your best on your performance days? And so, yeah, I played all through college. I was, I started playing in other countries. I played in Spain for 4 seasons. I was just playing in Italy. And, it is a weird space because it is a really brutal sport. It's super, super high contact. And, I had a lot of life going on in the background of me playing sports, and sports was a really big outlet for me. And I had a question that my friend asked me the other day. She was like, what was your gateway like into this like really holistic space? And it was actually my eating disorder that I developed at a pretty decently young age. And I had a huge wake up call when I was in university, actually. And I was speaking to one of my athletic trainers, and they do a lot of testing and just making sure how your body is working throughout the season, double checking on a lot of things. And I had not gotten my period for, I think it was 3 months at that point. And there's something called the female athlete triad. And I was starting to show signs for a lot of that. And she was like, if you continue going down this path, you will not be able to play rugby because it's a really brutal sport. You're going to start snapping your bones. It's just not going to work. And that was a huge wake up call for me to be like, what am I doing? There's a lot of healing that needs to be done here. And it started with just food was the really big thing for me, of using it to control a very uncontrollable feeling that was going on in my life, and doing that with movement as well, of when things felt really out of control emotionally, what can I do so I feel like I can get a grip on my life? And so, I did a lot of therapy because I was really struggling with a lot of that, and it was amazing. And I started actually going to a lot of these groups. I started getting into meditation actually, and I did seminars, I was listening to podcasts about just ways that you can change your mind, ways that you can change the way that you choose to face life. That it does that is in your control, and there are things that you can do to start somatically releasing these things that we've been storing in our body for our entire lives. That we all do that. Then I got introduced to actually breath work, and I went to a breathwork seminar, and I had done some breathwork before, training and games and things to just kind of calm myself down. But I'd never experienced breathwork like this in my life. And I went to this event, and it was 3 days, and we had done 3 different breathwork experiences. And it was absolutely profound, to the point that I was like, I need to learn how to do this and teach others how to do this, because the somatic healing, the emotional healing, just overall life healing was just so profound that I was like, how can I share this with the world? And there's so many benefits, and there's so many different ways you can do it. It doesn't have to be this really deep altered state of consciousness that you can reach, but there's ways you can implement it in everyday life. And there's different things that I give to clients that are struggling with anxiety, the way that they show up to their training, if they're just going through a really difficult time in their life. And it's just a great practice to have in the morning, because we wake up thinking about all these thoughts we had from the day before, and we're really, really good at being addicted to stress. So just having a practice to really ground yourself and start your day. So yeah, that was a bit of a wordy answer, but that's all of that kind of integrated into one timeline.
Lili, like, you've been in the strength and conditioning, like, weight rooms, right? Especially as a college athlete. And I love what you said there about just how you really had this conversation with your athletic trainer. And that was in college, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you had this conversation, and then you go on this path to recovery. Did your performance like go through the roof when you started like healing and really changing your ways?
I can't even tell you how much it did. I don't even want to know how I was lifting, what I was lifting, how I was training, but everything changed. Everything. The way that my body was adapting to the training, the way that I was recovering, how strong I was getting, how fast I was getting. I became a completely different athlete.
That's awesome. Well, you mentioned a bunch of things there, but I know Darian and I really wanted to focus in on breath work.
Can we pause just for 1 second? Because I want to acknowledge that Lili opened up about her eating disorder, because I've opened up about my eating disorder in the introduction episode. So if anyone's wondering what I'm referring to, you can listen to the introduction episode, because it's so common. I think it's so common with females in general, but female athletes, females in fitness, females in dietetics. Like, eating disorder is such a prevalent thing. And it's so interesting to me how exercise can be one of the reasons that an eating disorder can start. And also movement can be a first step to the journey out of it. It's such like a weird thing, because it sounds like, Lili, you were in this eating disorder even while you were in athletics as a soccer player and then as a rugby player. And then it was a turning point for you when you realized what my body can do when I actually feed it properly and start treating my body with respect. Now, where can my body take me in terms of like the sport that I love, but also in terms of like my mental and emotional capacity to like deal with the world? I think that's just so important. We don't have to like super deep dive on that, but I want to do a whole episode on it because it's so common and prevalent. And I was wondering if you could just quickly touch on how the eating disorder plays into all of this for you? Does this work that you do now, is this tied to that?
Like,
For
are
you
you saying
personally?
with like breath work and everything and all of this kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, because what you kind of learn when you go through that is the eating disorder is the surface level issue. It's the way that you cope with controlling, kind of like I said, this uncontrollable feeling. And food, and I always say this, like, we're all on a spectrum with food. Like, we all do weird things with food. We don't have to necessarily have a eating disorder diagnosis or even considered to have disordered eating, but just the way that we all operate around food, like, we need it to survive. And there's a lot of research that supports this. Like, a lot of trauma from your childhood can be linked to disordered eating patterns or eating disorders. And a lot of this work is, again, kind of like I said, like, somatically releasing this. Like, there's things that, I don't know if you guys have ever read The Body Keeps the Score, but there's, your body stores trauma. And like, these are ways that we have these tools that we can start releasing this on a subconscious level, which maybe we can't do in our everyday life, like when we're consciously thinking about it. And yeah, I mean, that issue runs so deep for so many people. And there's so much, it's so sneaky how it's just so integrated into our language, into our everyday life, into, how we make choices around food. So absolutely it's tied in. And I'm still working through things like that. It runs really, really deep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So now back to what Joey was saying. We're going to get into the breathwork stuff. So what
Sure.
is breathwork? I feel like this is your specialty. What exactly is breathwork?
You have
Yeah.
to tell people outside of just go read Breath by James Nestor. You can't say that.
Oh, of course. So breath work. Okay, so we have a system called our limbic system. So breath work directly affects the limbic system. It's basically like a controlled pattern of breath, and it can be a slew of different things. So we have slow deep breaths, which is associated to relaxation, activation, which is, with the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest. This kind of like gives us that calming effect. Then we can do rapid breathing, which stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. So this can potentially bring like intense emotions or heightened alertness. There's also breath holding, which can be used to kind of further intensify the effects of breath work of by creating like a temporary state of stress. So there's reasons why we do all of these. So let me back up a little bit. So we have our parasympathetic nervous system and our sympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic is fight or flight. So it's actually considered to be good to be in your sympathetic nervous system when facing a potentially dangerous situation, stress, whatever it might be. When we're training, that's a great example of when it's good to be in our sympathetic nervous system. Anytime we go under any type of strain, we're exercising or we're sick. So it's necessary. Where it's not necessary is that's where a lot of us operate most of the time. And if you're listening, a really great way to kind of tune into this and make this practical is, where are you breathing right now? If you are breathing from your chest, you are operating most likely in your sympathetic nervous system. Unless you are deep belly breathing right now, you're probably not operating from your parasympathetic nervous system. And that's actually our default state. And I always say, look at like a dog or a baby sleeping. If you just look at them, you can watch their belly rise and fall. They have not been, they're not in like a stressful state. They're not worried about what they're doing tomorrow. They're not worried about whatever. We do a really great job of worrying about literally absolutely everything and anything. So then we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest. So it's good to obviously be in this because you're feeling relaxed. This is great when you're resting, when you're feeding. It helps your body to conserve energy, especially after like periods of stress and danger, whatever that might be. I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but whatever that might be. It also helps regulate and automate your body's functions, like your heart rate, your metabolism, and body temperature. So there's a lot of reasons why it's important to be able to, which we can absolutely do, switch over to the other nervous system for obvious reasons. One, if you're training, or if you're like, I'm really freaking stressed out all the time and A lot of us don't even know that we're always operating in that. So, like I said, breath work directly affects our limbic system, which is responsible for processing our emotions, influencing activity through like the rhythm of your breathing. It's a really great way of being able to take control in the situation by calming yourself down. And the awesome thing is you can strengthen these nervous systems just like a muscle. So the more that you practice this, the more that you can say, whoa, I am totally operating from a high state of stress right now. What's something I can do to just kind of like switch that? And you can do that in a minute if you have the right tools, which it's really simple, really, really easy. So that's just a little rundown of kind of the basics of breath work.
Talk to us about the difference between nasal breathing and mouth breathing.
Yeah. So they're used for a bunch of different reasons. So in terms of breath work, right, if we're talking about that, if we want to kind of, and it depends what the outcome of this is, right? Like if we're trying to calm down, a lot of the times we want to switch to nasal breathing to really just slow down the breath. So a lot of the times, like here's a really great one, just a little practical little gift you can take with yourself. So if you're feeling really, really stressed and you want to slow down your breath and just switch to the other nervous system, you want to close your mouth and breathe only through your nose. Now you want to breathe out longer than you're breathing in. So for instance, breathing in your nose for 4 seconds, out for 8. Do that just 3 times and see how you feel. Now, it's just a way to control your breathing at a state so you're able to just reach that more calm state, because we can't think clearly, we can't process anything that's going on when we're stressed because we're looking for that thing which a lot of the times is just our stress and what's going on in our mind. And mouth breathing, really great way to heighten your senses, really great way to get focused, really, really great way to just switch on the brain for whatever you're doing. A lot of us kind of just mouth breathe though, like in our day to day, and it's not really helping us kind of calm down. So if you can have a really conscious practice, you can really gain some awesome control over that.
So, okay, you were saying that there's like different times, like during a workout, you might want to feel a certain way. Not during workout, you need to feel a certain way. Like, what is like practically in terms of the breath? Is there a certain like type of breath work that someone should be doing or could be doing like during their warm up for their workout to kind of prepare them for their workout? And then how should they be breathing during? And then what would they do after in terms of how the breath work looks? And then what does that do to the body?
Yeah, excuse me. So I think the most important thing, because I think we can get really kind of caught up in like, well, what should I be doing specifically at this point and this point? And I definitely was like that when I was learning about all the different types. But I think the most important thing, one of the most practical things I can give to people listening is, are you tuning into like where your body is at in the day? When you wake up, how are you breathing when you wake up? Where is your mind going when you wake up? So in that instance, like something that I do is, how can I calm myself in the morning? So it's really about just that really controlled breathing, kind of like that little exercise I gave before. Now, before a training session, this goes for people who go into the gym and maybe have a little bit of gym anxiety. You're probably breathing up in your chest a little bit. How can you calm that down so you can get focused? Because breathing up here, when it's not in a controlled state, you're not focused. You're focused on like, what's everyone thinking about me? Oh my God, where are the dumbbells? That's no place to make any type of step forward to do anything for yourself. So it's really about, how can I calm myself down? And sometimes things that I do is when I'm doing my mobility to get myself warmed up, I'm just connecting with my diaphragm. I'm connecting with my belly, because when I go into my bigger lifts, bracing your core is going to be really important. A lot of us don't do that. And a lot of clients say like, how do I breathe? I'm like, just connect to your breath. And I want you to just focus on breathing in, and I want you to breathe out when you really have to exert yourself, just making it super simple, because especially if you're a newer lifter, there's so many things to think about. Just saying, how can I connect to my breath right now and do it in a way where I'm doing it consciously, rather than like, and you're just, holding that bar behind. It's not, there's too many things to think about. And then after a session, when I'm stretching, I'm calming my breath down again. A lot of the times it's really more about calming your breath down rather than hiking it back up, because that's where a lot of us are operating from. So yeah, like I said, to kind of tie that together, just start noticing where you're breathing. And if you're breathing from your chest, start saying, whoa, okay, let me just do a couple of breaths right now and just get centered really quick.
Yeah, I think especially like during the workout, I kind of wanted to go back to that during the workout really quick. And you talked about diaphragmatic breathing. It's so important because, and you kind of touched on it, like it's not just about the breathing, it's also about the function of your core. Because when you breathe in, the diaphragm pushes down and the pelvic floor pushes down. And then when you breathe out, naturally the pelvic floor and the diaphragm lift. So they're kind of like working together, lowering and lifting as you inhale and exhale. And we can kind of use that just natural mechanism to our advantage when we're lifting weights and exercising to help us brace our core. So what you said about exerting, when you have to exert, you want to be exhaling. So you're kind of always matching breath to movement. That's kind of how I think about it, especially for pelvic floor health. Like I think if you're lifting at about like 80% or heavier than your max, you want to utilize more of like a breath hold. But if you're lifting less than that, which most people are, matching the breath to the movement so that you can brace through the core. So like if you're doing a squat, for example, you're inhaling on the way down of your squat and then exhaling on the way up to naturally use that engaged pelvic floor and diaphragm to your advantage. So like talk quickly about like how that breath work helps in terms of strengthening and injury prevention.
Well, yeah, I mean, most of injuries happen when we are not being aware of how we're moving, where we're bearing the weight, how we're engaging our I mean, that's where I've gotten all of my injuries from. When I am, yeah.
Yes. Quick anecdote.
Yeah.
I actually thought I gave myself a hernia just this weekend because of course I have a 4-year-old, as like every listener knows at this point, who was acting a little crazy, and I had to pick him up, and I just kind of turned without thinking. It was kind of like a chaotic moment. And I was like, did I just give myself a hernia? Something strained. I wasn't breathing properly. I wasn't focused. Like, it's so important.
It's so important. It's so important. And I do this as a daily practice, and there's still plenty of times where I disconnect. Like I threw out my back a couple months ago and I'm like, how did I even do that? I was doing an early morning lift and I was tired, and then I just pulled and I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm done for the next couple of days. And we operate so much unconscious, like so much of the time unconsciously. And I think the gym and just lifting and health and wellness can be such a great mirror for how you operate in life a lot of the times. And I get this from so many clients where they're like, I notice how I'm showing up in this area of my life. I'm showing up in other areas of my life. And just on that sole fact of just being more conscious and more opportunities for you to do that, I mean, that transfers over to everything in your life, you know?
Yeah. So like if a client like just focuses on like breathing while they're moving, I feel like that's probably a really good way to just bring the attention back to the workout and the movement and bracing your core instead of letting your mind like wander. That's where everything goes awry.
We can't really say core, Healy, because core is a very exaggerated term. Like core,
Okay,
right?
talk to me more about it.
So like you mentioned the pelvic floor and diaphragm. I used to say they're peas in the pod. I think our listeners, to understand what the core is, right? It's like this basically cylinder in our midsection, right? But everyone just thinks abs, right? But it's so beyond that. I would agree that the diaphragm is part of the core. I would agree that pelvic floor is part of the core. I would agree that anything that attaches to the pelvis is part of the core. And you can totally agree or disagree, Lili, but I would say that the most important core muscle you have is your diaphragm, because I think we don't use it enough to stabilize, to brace, to engage. It's the forefront of how we actually engage with our midline stability, which is basically how we stay tight under load, or how we move beautifully or chop boards with our fists. Like it all starts from somewhere. And I would argue that it always starts with the diaphragm. Would you agree?
I wouldn't disagree with that even for a moment. And that's why I say, like, to clients when they want to just get more connected to their body, come back to your breath. Just come back to your breath. We do it unconsciously all day. And if you can just connect with that with your movement, you're pretty golden. You're honestly really golden. And you're going to prevent a lot of injuries that way.
I love what you said about like the sympathetic nervous system. Like there is a time and a place for that, and there's a time and place for parasympathetic. But I think the realness is in understanding when the two are beneficial. So for instance, if you're a powerlifter and you're going up for a 1RM and at a meet, like you need to get in that zone. But also you need to come down from that. And maybe you can take us through that. Like what would you say to a lifter who's been, let's say they're a first responder, or let's say they're a mom of 6, or let's say they're
6?
they're going through
Holy
a
moly.
midlife crisis. Like these people are always in fight or flight, right? And so let's say they do like to exercise, it's good for emotional health, etc. But where do you start implementing how to bring them back down? Like, is it right after they walk out of the door? Is it before they leave the gym? Like, where do we start to want to have that recovery process kick in?
Yeah, I think, and again, it comes back to how much are you willing to be conscious in this process? Because it's so easy to just forget to come back to your breath because we're just doing it all the time, you know? And that's why I say it's so important to just have the awareness of, or just setting the intention. Can I be more with my breath today? Can I just be able to notice where it's at after my lifting session, for instance, get in the zone. There's things you can do to get your heart rate up. There's things you can do to get your breathing right. So you can get in that state that you need to get in, and having that practice, having the tools in your box to say, okay, after I'm done, when I'm doing my cool down, what are some things I can do to just get my breath down, switch to that other nervous system so my body can start doing what it needs to do, so I can shut off, so I can, be out of this fight or flight, because we don't want to be in that all the time. Like I said, we're in that enough. And, everyday life, this goes for anyone, even sitting on this podcast right now, I'm breathing in my chest right now. And that's okay, because I want to be a little bit more focused. I want to be in this conversation. My senses are more heightened. But after this, I don't want to keep operating in that, because that's not really good for me. It's not also aligned with what I want to do after this, which is calm down. I want to get outside. I want to get connected again. So it's a practice, right? Like it's something that we have to build, and we have to build awareness to, and we have to build the toolbox for it. But just sitting with, again, and I know I keep sounding like a broken breath, but like, where am I breathing right now? And what am I doing? So having that practice to get back down to that calm state, so you can then be a better mom. You can be a better first responder. You can be a better athlete. You can be a better whatever, because if we're not connected to ourselves, we can't connect to anything around us, because we're just focusing on the next thing that's going to potentially hurt us or potentially go wrong or whatever it might be. So
yeah, something really cool about breathwork specifically, and like, I don't know too much about breathwork, but it's a very low barrier to entry. I think a lot of times when we talk about recovery, and Joey and I have talked about it quite a bit, we had a whole argument about nutrition, sleep, all this stuff. But those things are, I think, like a little bit harder to fix, quote unquote. Like fixing your sleep, that is a journey. That's really hard, in my opinion. There's so many external factors that could be playing into like the sleep thing. Doing a mobility routine, even that's a barrier there. You have to really set aside a chunk of time and focus on your mobility, and you have to know the moves to do. But with breath work, I mean, we all know how to breathe. We might not be breathing efficiently or effectively right now, but we all know how to breathe because our body naturally does it. And it takes, I think you said, like 1 minute. If you have 1 minute, you can start this breath work. Such a low barrier to entry. So what do you think, like someone who's just starting on this journey and they're like, okay, if I could take one step towards my recovery and towards getting a little bit more awareness in my life, what breath technique would you recommend to that person?
yeah. So what I would recommend is, again, something, and this is what we do with our clients, like what is something that you can do consistently over a long period of time and something that would be easy for you to implement. And, how much time do we spend scrolling on our phones a day, and setting an intention with yourself of saying, and sometimes I do it when I sit up right in bed. Like, I'm going to sit up and I'm just going to breathe for 1 minute. And like I said, one of the ones that I do that is just really accessible is breathing in for 4 seconds, holding at the top for 6, releasing for 8, doing that 3 times. It's like, we all have time to do that, but it has to be a choice. There has to be a level of awareness, which is what I was talking about before, because it's so easy to say, oh yeah, I'm going to do my breath work in the morning. And the whole day passes by and you don't get it done. So to really have this desire to say, do I feel good most of the day? Like, am I regulating my emotions really well? Am I getting frustrated really easy? Is this a really stressful time of the year? Do I have a lot of things going on? Is my training really rigorous right now? And what's one thing I can do? And like you said, Darian, you said it so beautifully, we can all breathe. That's the great thing, is that you don't have to teach someone how to breathe in and out. Otherwise, they're not here, So being able to, it's really, I know it sounds silly, but it's really just like, that's a biohack, being able to regulate your nervous system. And again, it's just such short bursts of time. I always say, why not?
Yeah, why not? So how does this play into like meditation?
Yeah. What about it specifically? Just how do they relate?
Like, okay, so I have always felt like I want to meditate. And then I'll go through periods of like trying to meditate. And
That says you can't focus for more than like 2 seconds, Darren.
that is not at all true, Joey. I can focus for a little longer than that. I can. So, but I have so many clients who are also like, I want to have a meditation practice. It's this thing that people like dream to do. They want to have a meditation practice. And I'm not exactly sure like where that comes from. Like, for me, I imagine myself as just much more calmer, more focused, more present if I meditate. Do these things go hand in hand? Like, can I do a breathing practice and then that like is a meditation practice? Like, how does meditation play into all of this?
Yeah, well, for me, they're totally intertwined. And, that's a big question I get to. Like, with meditation, a lot of it is like, well, I can't sit there and I can't sit with my thoughts. And it's like, that's okay.
It's scary.
Yeah, it totally is, which is why we don't want to do it. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons to do it. We don't sit with ourselves enough. And even just, again, you want to like inch into these things. I think a lot of the times too, we're like, I'll do it for 15 minutes, do it for 20 minutes. That can be a lot sometimes. So a really great thing with breathwork is it helps you silence the mind a little bit. And meditation, the point of it's not to silence the mind, but it makes it a little bit more enjoyable when you can silence the mind a little bit. But it's just a really great way to just get connected to your body, because we operate in our mind all day. And anytime we don't want to feel something, we run to the mind. So it's really important to just kind of sit there and just let things kind of pass. But you can't think your way into a calm state. You can't do it, because you did a really great job thinking yourself out of a calm state. So it's going to be really difficult to go the opposite way. So it's a really awesome way to just get really centered. Again, just doing a couple of breaths. I promise you, if you just try to do what I told you before, do it 3 times and just see how you feel. Imagine if you did that for a minute, even doing it for 5 minutes. So meditation is really fantastic because, one, it allows you to connect to your intentions for the day, to just stop the constant like go in your mind just for a moment, because you're going to go the rest of your day doing that. So might as well give yourself a couple of minutes to start. And it's just a great practice to have, even doing that when you're about to do a session. If you're an athlete, before going into your big performance days, visualization, I mean, you can use visualization for anything. So meditation's a whole nother thing, but they're completely and totally intertwined in my personal experience.
Yeah, sorry, Joey. I'm going to let you talk in just 1 second. But I really liked what you said about inching your way in, because I do think often, and we've talked about this in a few episodes, is clients come in with this kind of like all or nothing mindset. Like, even with fitness, it's like, I want to go 5 days a week, an hour a day. I want to start lifting weight. It's like, okay, but is that practical and sustainable? Is that really the best way to build this habit? You can just start with the smallest dose of whatever it is to build the habit and the consistency. So just doing that 1 minute and then building over time, just like with fitness. Like, okay, you aren't in a routine. Okay, do 10 minutes, move your body for 10 minutes. It's moving the needle forward on building this lifelong beneficial habit that will slowly but surely change how you move through the world.
Lily, I like what you said there about like in a world of today, like with constant bombardment and immediate satisfaction, like we need meditation more than ever. I think we need silence more than ever. And there's like very little barrier to entry, even like breath work. And this is something that's been going on for how many thousands of years, breath work and meditation. Like it's nothing new, right? But I think in a world of today, we need it more than ever. But like how, and I want to ask you this too with the breathing in for what, 4 seconds, hold 6, out 8. Do we breathe through our mouth or breathe in through our nose, hold, and then out through our mouth?
So it all depends. But for the morning, you want to do in through your nose. In through your nose. You can do out through your nose too. Yeah, in and out through
Okay.
your nose.
And then along the lines of meditation, what are your suggestions on for someone starting? Like, should we do it in the morning? Should we do it in the evening? Should we do it at a time that's best for us? Like, where is it most beneficial, do you think, for beginners?
I think the most important thing with any type of practice with that is finding a time that works best for you. What I would recommend is first thing when you wake up, but some people have kids. But really, the most important thing is, are you going to make it important for yourself? You know, that's why it's important to do it at the same time every day, because you're showing to yourself, like, this is important. And regulating myself right now is important because I'm going to be a better mom. I'm going to be a better friend. I'm going to be a better teacher. And that's more important than running to my phone and answering a text message. That's more important than starting my day from this stress response that I'm so addicted to that I don't even realize that I'm addicted to. And it's important. I mean, this is so transferable over to, what we help our clients with, are you going to choose yourself? Like, how are you going to show up for yourself and meeting yourself where you're at? But we can't make you do that. Like, this all comes down to, are you going to choose to step into this version of yourself that you know that you can? And I know it sounds silly, but it can just start with choosing to do a 5-minute meditation for yourself, choosing that over the same habits you go to every single morning, going for your coffee first thing, choose yourself first thing in the morning. I know that sounds a little bit whatever, but it transfers over for the rest of your day, the rest of your week, the rest of your life.
If we never recover too, we're not going to see any results. I think people like they see the reels on Instagram like this no days off grind mentality, but there is the yin and the yang. There's the go hard, but there's the recovery. If we don't recovery, I used to tell clients like you're only as good as your recovery. So especially tapping into that relaxed state, that silent state, that calm state, because you're right. We're not going to think our way there. It's like this habit we have to constantly be on the grind to get there.
Absolutely. And it's so true. I mean, I hear that all the time of being like, I want to do things every day. And I'm like, when you got to schedule in the recovery just like a session. And that was something a trainer told me years ago. And I never used to do that back in my day. And when I started, I was like, my performance skyrocketed. And it's different when you go through it and you kind of experience it, but it's so true. Like, we've got to schedule in that time for us to just bring it down a bit so our body can do what it needs to do, so our mind can do what it needs to do. It's all connected,
I think we should go on a quick journey of some of these like trendy kind of recovery wellness things that are happening right now. We could do kind of like
Can we do overrated, underrated?
Yeah, we'll do like a rapid
Oh.
fire, overrated, underrated. But Lili, feel free to like elaborate a bit. I know that you're not like, certified in all of these things, but I know that you're kind of in this world. So would love to hear your thoughts. So Joey, do you want to throw one at her first?
Okay, Lily, you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Overrated or underrated? Cold plunges.
Underrated. Totally underrated.
Say more.
I think there's a lot to it. I mean, our cold exposure is really, really awesome for recovery, just for even, it's a biohacking thing that I've been trying to get into. It's really tough, really, really hard. And also even just on like a mental side, being able to do something that difficult in the morning. Like imagine being super warm in your bed, it's freezing cold outside and you step and you are like turning on the shower, it's ice cold and you're like, all right, I gotta get in here. You know, it's like starting your day with something difficult is incredible. And it's also amazing for recovery, contrast therapy, all of that. But so
I learned about
absolutely.
contrast therapy the good way. After a long run, cold shower and then hot, and then cold
Yeah,
and then hot, and it
it's
feels. And then
horrible.
you do that with breath, and then go hot tub and smoke a cigar.
What
It
if I
sounds
just
like
want to
hell.
what if I just want to like stay in bed and be comfy? Can I do it?
You totally can.
Mindset work. Like mindfulness.
Completely underrated. Underrated 100%. Everything starts there. It doesn't matter what you do. Your relationship to all of it is the most important thing.
You know what's hard to do is because I was in the college strength and conditioning section for a while, right? Like it's hard to preach that to a group of football players, a group of wrestlers, a group of ruggers, to be mindful, to be present, because especially in strength and conditioning, and Lili, you know this, it is constant stress. We must win at all costs, right? And I think the best strength coaches in the world have consulted people like Wim Hof, have consulted people like James Nestor to come in and tell us there's a time and place for everything, but you need to calm down. I got a good one. Okay, overrated or underrated nutrition?
Such a big topic.
I think I would say underrated. I would definitely say underrated, but that's a totally nuanced topic. I think it depends also where you're coming out with that. There's totally things in there that are overrated as well, but I'd say in general, underrated.
I think overrated. No one's asking me, but we all could have guessed that was the case. But what would you say the basics are? Because Joey and I did have a fight about this. Like the very basic things before you start doing these like biohacking things.
Absolutely. And I feel like I should have listened to this fight so I could have picked a side or something like that, but I'll give you my honest answer. But I mean, it's what I tell people. It's like, doesn't matter also what you do. I think your intention behind what you're doing is the most important thing. I have clients who like do everything perfectly to a T. You know, they train, they're implementing progressive overloading, they're trying to get stronger. They feel like they're eating right. And I'm like, what's your relationship to all of those things? Like, how are you showing up to that? What's your intention behind that? And I think it's also really about like, this is a whole nother conversation, but how can you be consistent with all of these things? Like, what's going to allow you to show up for yourself, whether that be a stretch routine, having some type of lifting program that you're following over whatever period of time, you know, eating foods that fuel your body and also working on your relationship to shame and guilt around that. For me, those are the basics and like how you speak to yourself through all of that, because there's people who have insane ripped bodies and they're not happy, you know, they're still shooting for more, they still don't feel enough. I think it really depends, I guess, who you ask, but I guess it would be just kind of, for me, my baseline has always been what's my intention behind what I'm doing and how can I take care of the mind, body, and soul, one thing every single day.
Yeah, I think that's such like a special and unique take that you don't hear a lot in the fitness space, which is truly like, how are you approaching what you're doing in terms of your health and fitness? Because there is like this darker side of fitness where it's all stemming from trying desperately to manipulate your body, whether that's being really restrictive with what you're eating, pushing way too hard in the gym, using substances to aid you in whatever that endeavor is. And like, you know, there's a whole world of like elite athleticism and pushing your body to these extremes that can be really negative, and it impacts what the result is actually going to be. But if we can approach it, which is what I think you're saying, from a place of like positivity and self-respect and genuine care for ourselves, the outcome will ultimately be so much better, especially because you're just going to feel better about it.
Yeah. It's a different experience when you come at a place from how can doing something to better your health, doing something to better your relationship to the whole experience changes the trajectory of how you're going to get there, how effective it's going to be, and who you're going to be when you get there, whenever that might be, whatever that may look like. So 100%.
Lili, we can talk with you for hours. Thank you so much for coming on. We really want to send our heartfelt thank you for talking to us about breath work and recovery and sharing your story more than anything. So thank you so much again.
Thank you guys. It's always a pleasure to chat with you guys.
You too. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you had as much fun as we did talking to Lili. Once again, just as a reminder, if you want to try out Trainwell 14 days free, go ahead and click the link in our show notes and get matched with your very own personal trainer.
We thank you guys so much for listening. We love you all. If you haven't already as well, please subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. Talk to you guys next time.